A player-created report was also published, which showed that democracy worldwide was nerfed from previous years. The Economist Democracy Index once again ranked countries from most to least democratic, with the S tier mostly consisting of Northern Europe, as well as a few countries with the Commonwealth bonus. The A tier was again mostly made up of European nations, with a handful of South American and Asian servers snagging some of the top places. The bottom tier was mostly made up of servers in the African region, which the developers keep forgetting to update. Both France and the United States fell down to B tier after nerfs to both their function of government and political culture downgraded their status to partial democracies. North Korea is unsurprisingly in last place and has been in dire need of a rework since the server was split during the Cold War expansion. The annual democracy report from The Economist was released this month, which looks at 60 different metrics over 5 different categories in order to rank countries by their democratic outcomes. According to the report, the most democratic country on earth was unsurprisingly Norway, followed by New Zealand, Finland, Sweden, Iceland, Denmark, Ireland, Taiwan, and then Switzerland and Australia, in a shared 9th place position. Although North Korea has been the reigning champion for being the least democratic country on earth, it was actually beaten by 2 other nations this year, and long-time viewers could probably guess which ones take the title. In second to last place we have Myanmar, which has now been under military rule for the past year, and when you consider that the government is literally airstriking citizens, you could probably imagine its democratic institutions aren't holding up all that well. In very last place, as you've probably guessed, is Afghanistan, which dropped a whopping 28 places after it was officially taken over by the Taliban in August last year, when one of the first things they did was ban women from the Ministry of Women. You can be sure they probably don't give a shit about citizens having a say over their own lives. In general, Eastern Europe was one of the biggest winners this year, with 3 whole countries moving their way up to the title of flawed democracies, while South America saw a particularly bad year, as it suffered the greatest fall of a single region since the start of the index in 2006. This decline was attributed to citizens losing confidence in democratic institutions during the COVID-19 pandemic, and a shift toward a populist strongman meta in the region. As you might imagine, Africa also didn't perform all that well, which is partly attributed to jihadist groups destabilizing the region, and the fact that it can't seem to go 5 fucking minutes without someone attempting a military coup. Of course, as around 60% of viewers for this channel come from just 5 countries, we might as well mention them as well. At number 5 is Germany, which ranks 15th in the world, qualifying the country as a full democracy. The nation has however slipped from 14th place, so they should probably keep an eye on things before any out of work painters get any fucking ideas. At number 4 is Australia, which fortunately gets to remain in the top 10. Although Australian citizens by law are required to vote in federal elections, the nation's lowest score was somehow given to political participation, which tells you all you need to know about the country. At number 3, we have Canada, which at 12th place also qualifies the nation as a full democracy. With this in mind, the country received its lowest score since 2006, and analysts suggest that the nation might be mirroring a trend in the United States, in which citizens have slowly lost trust in both political parties and government institutions. The second most amount of viewers come from the United Kingdom, which they'll be happy to know has been ranked higher than France. Although still considered a full democracy, the United Kingdom is mighty close to dropping below this threshold, meaning there really isn't much breathing room to drop any lower. Lastly, roughly 40% of our viewership is in the United States, which we can proudly say only dropped 1 place in the past year. The United States hasn't been considered a full democracy since 2015, and has long been held back in both the metrics of political culture and the functioning of government. What makes this particularly damning is that even if you somehow moved the United States to South America, the Middle East, or Africa, it still wouldn't be the highest rated democracy within these regions. Overall, democracy around the world has seen another year-on-year decrease, which has mostly been attributed to the COVID-19 pandemic. However, with vaccination rates steadily increasing and with nations slowly easing restrictions, time will only tell if these stats will return to pre-pandemic levels or keep drifting ever so slightly lower. British newspaper, The Economist, released its yearly democracy report this month, which provides an overview of democratic trends from all corners of the world. The report also ranks countries based on their level of democracy, using the 5 metrics of electoral process, the functioning of government, political participation, political culture, and civil liberties. The good news is that overall, democracy worldwide has remained at around the same level as the previous year. However, the bad news is that this includes the rollback of many COVID-19 lockdown measures, which should have otherwise provided a noticeable increase. In terms of countries themselves, the most democratic nations have mostly remained unchanged, with Norway holding the top spot for yet another year, followed closely by New Zealand, Iceland, Sweden, then Finland. Australia was one of the hardest hit from the full democracy category, falling a whole 6 places from the previous year, while Chile actually rose 6 places to sit just below the United Kingdom in 19th position. Both France and Spain were also big winners from this year, moving from being flawed democracies to joining the 24 nations who get to call themselves fully democratic. The Czech Republic and Greece also made serious democratic strides this year, but unfortunately fell just short of the fully democratic club. Down the bottom of the ranking are all the usual culprits, with Afghanistan taking last place for obvious reasons, Myanmar in second place, following its takeover by Funny Hat Man, and North Korea being the third least democratic nation, to no one's surprise. The biggest overall drop, however, and by a large margin, went to the nation of Russia, falling 22 places to be just below Sudan and Guinea. Russia's wartime society has seen repression and censorship severely hurt its democratic score, which has been on a gradual decline since the index first began in 2006. Russia's long history of autocratic rulers, its embarrassment after the fall of the Soviet Union, and its botched attempt at democracy in the 90s, have all contributed to the dictatorship style of government we see today, which has only been supercharged by the invasion of Ukraine. Ukraine itself only dropped a single place in its democracy ranking, as unfortunately, much like Russia, the nation has seen a general decline in democratic values over the past 2 decades. It should be noted that this shouldn't be confused with the nation's level of freedom, which is an entirely separate metric. The region with the biggest improvement overall was Western Europe, which was already the strongest region in terms of democratic performance. The elephant in the room, however, was the nation of Turkey, which has seen a steady decrease in democratic values under President Recep Erdogan, earning the nation the classification of a hybrid regime. With this in mind, the level of democracy observed within Turkey hasn't fallen at all from the previous year, which the report goes on to explain. Quite hilariously, the analysis found that the reason Turkey's democracy didn't decline any lower is because many of the metrics measured realistically couldn't get much worse. In the same vein, the worst performing regions in the world were also the ones to regress the most. The Middle East has now fallen to have a lower level of democracy than before the Arab Spring in 2010, while Africa has been a victim of extremist militias and more coup attempts than you can shake an AK-47 at. The biggest single winner from this year's report was the nation of Thailand, which jumped a whole 17 spots from the previous year. This isn't to say that the nation is anywhere near fully democratic, however, as topics such as the defense budget and reforms to the monarchy are still completely off the table. As much of our audience is American, we should also talk about the freedom-loving United States, which in terms of its overall score, didn't move a single fraction of a point in either direction. Due to other nations rising, the country did however drop 4 places to rank 30, putting it just below Israel, but just above Slovenia. Quite unfortunately, this also means that the nation is still not classified as a full democracy, a title that it unfortunately lost in 2016. Overall, political participation is a huge strength for the country, with the recent midterm election having one of the highest turnouts on record. The nation's electoral process and civil liberties also scored quite high, as the nation went the past year devoid of any major democracy-threatening incidents. the land of the free does however suffer in the metrics of political culture and functioning of government, which have both become the victim of intense political polarization within the country. The report states that the nation's highly politicized media landscape has led to such an amplified level of division, and this will likely remain the case leading into the 2024 presidential election. Perhaps the most shocking finding from the report is that only 24 countries around the world, or just 8% of the global population, live under a full democracy. Although many regions of the world have managed to shore up their democratic processes, others have only regressed since the start of the 21st century, meaning this form of governance not only remains rare, but increasingly more fragile.
What if it's me looking down on me? The world above must also be. This could go on for infinity.